feel like a ton of us just would, we all need to get together and say, all right, I don't know what we're going to do, but we got to do something about social media.
Yeah. There
Well,
needs
it's
to be a social media revolution going
like we
on at
all
some
have to
point.
come to terms with how much we're getting out of it and how much we're not getting out of it. But, and we'll see, it's going to transform a lot. Is transforming a lot. So,
Mhm.
I don't know, not to jump into AI, but I mean, I don't really know, like even with Facebook and Instagram, and you've got this little meta guy talking
Yeah.
to you, meta AI out of nowhere. And I'm like, how is that different than the old search? It just used to say search.
Yeah.
Now it's like, can our AI help you with anything? And I'm like, I don't know. How is this different? Like, what is it? Isn't it just still the search engine? Like that, it just makes me laugh.
That's all I use it for, essentially.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just old and I just don't know how to like utilize it right, but I
That's what
still
I'm
use it just
wondering.
as a search engine no
Yeah.
matter what. Like
Cause I'm like,
I
what
find
can this
people tags.
well, when it first popped up, I'm like, can it do something different than what it did yesterday? Like it doesn't say that, it just says, how can
Mhm.
our AI help you? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if it
Like, you
can.
just run it all for me. That's how AI can help. And I mean, that's one of the things like
That's
AI,
true.
it's such a big controversy between so many creators of like even just using it for minimal tasks, And I
Yeah,
always
like
feel
there.
like AI is like more of like to me, it's like a guitarist, and then
Yeah.
they plug in a guitar and they're using a distortion pedal or a phaser pedal or
Yeah.
something like that. And it's just like, oh, you're using it as a pedal, like a tool. You're not
Mhm.
using it to create everything, but you're using it to enhance something that
Yeah.
you are creating. And I
Yeah.
had a team message us about an anthology submission being like, hey, I know you're posting all the anti AI stuff. I just want you to let you know we did use some AI tool to help with the coloring. And I looked at their submission and I looked at like the coloring on that page, and what it
Yeah.
was this crazy blast thing. And I was like, oh, you guys are using it as like a tool. Like it's
Mhm.
enhancing it. It's not creating it. It's
Yeah.
enhancing. You're using it to manipulate. I get that. I think that's cool.
Okay.
I think you don't utilize it in a sense. If you have to write copy every single day and you're posting 20, as a social media manager, posting 20 blurbs a day, like you're going to
Yeah.
fry out after blurb number 3 in all
Yeah.
honesty. And so using it to like reword some stuff and like reconstruct, I don't mind using it as a tool,
Mhm.
but like overall, like crutch or fallback, or like I always think about it like when I was a musician, if my pedal board isn't working, can I still play this song without all my fancy pedals and sound effects? I
Yeah.
should be able to. And if not, then this song probably isn't that great if I need every single one of these to make it real.
Well, yeah, I
So,
think if it can't be art, I mean, I am still formulating my opinions about AI. I have some very strong opinions in some areas and then some very unformed opinions in other areas. Um, but yeah, if it can't be art or it can't be a story before the AI,
right.
then there's probably a problem.
Mhm.
However, it's so new. I don't know what it'll be in 5 years. I do think, we're kind of talking because I'm the film industry, obviously. I am very much part of the film industry. My husband is a director. All my friends are working film. And we just went through that huge strike, the writer's strike. And it is very much all these strikes and all the disruption, besides just greed and corporate greed in general,
Mhm.
which
Yeah,
is
no,
really,
honestly.
is actually our problem
Yeah.
more than AI. But is that there's so many conversations about AI, and when visual effects came on the scene, like when with Abyss and Jurassic Park and I'm sorry, Terminator. Don't forget
Mhm.
Terminator. Um, people, everyone lost their minds because they were like, "This, there'll be no more filmmakers. This is gonna be everything." Now, there were jobs that were lost, and like I would say there's probably not as many puppeteers or like people
Mhm.
making, there definitely were jobs that became less, and and didn't have as much need for them. But I mean, and they made a lot of bad visual effects movies, like a lot of versions of things we never needed that was just
Yep.
visual
Yeah.
effects. So
100%. Yeah.
we got a bunch of garbage. And then I would say that there's some action sequences to this day in movies where I'm just like, this is not enhancing this movie. I know you think it is, but we're just all of our brains shut off at some point because
Yeah.
there's no practical effect in there, and our brains can sense the falseness of it.
Mhm.
And there's a point when you're watching a scene and you know when it happens, when your mind, I mean, I watch everything. When at some point you're watching Avengers and you just like I
You're just
love
like,
Avengers,
where do we
guys. Don't
go?
get all mad. But like at some point, my brain just shuts off, and I'm like, all right, look, when this fight scene's over, let me know because I don't care anymore. Like there
Well,
is a moment when you just don't care
perfect
anymore.
example, Dune 2. I was watching it last night. And
Yeah.
when Austin Butler is like walking into the giant stadium to start doing
Mhm.
all those like self fights, right when he entered the stadium, I was just like, man, we were just in like these catacombs where it was all deserty and,
Yeah.
very real life and it was all on set and everything. And then
Yeah.
you show the stadium and I'm just like, I just got pulled out. I like
Yeah.
just can see
You can
how
feel it.
fake it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have
Mhm.
to, and luckily he does a phenomenal acting
Yeah.
job, pulls you back
Yeah.
in. But like,
Yeah.
yes,
Hands down.
it does. But it does for sure. It's like there's these moments where you're like, get out of there. Cause and I think that's what will probably happen. I do think AI will there will be jobs that completely disappear because of AI. And
Mhm.
that's just sad. And I don't know how to, uh, I don't, because of how money driven everybody is in capitalism, like, and how like it's all bottom line, it's increasing to your shareholders every year. I don't
Mhm.
know how we that is just where you have your unions and you do your best to protect your workers. AI itself is an interesting, I don't know, I don't know the answer. I don't think society is going to crumble necessarily, but I do
Right.
think it's going to be entirely transformed. And it's weird as a parent right now because, it used to be like, got to teach your kid to code. They got to learn how to code. Well, now the people are saying no one is ever going to, you're not going to need to know how to code because you're just going to have to be able to tell an AI thing what you want coded. And I'm like, that seems like a recipe for disaster, but all right.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so then you're like, well, what side skill am I supposed to be teaching my kid for this new world? And honestly, I think we're in a point where we don't know anymore. We don't know
Yeah.
what that is. So I'm like, well, we got to teach them how to communicate, how to make music, how to
Mhm.
tell stories. I think those things are all still important. I'm just find it curious that we want to farm it out, farm out the
Yeah.
fun, the thing that is exciting about life. And I think the only reason we want to farm it out is because we want to make it a commodity. You
Mhm.
know, it's that we're afraid of AI because everything is made into a commodity in this country. So I don't know. Like if it was just we were all just making art because we love telling, no one would be trying to get AI to make art.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they
But
see the profit
yeah,
value behind the art and they're just like, "Oh, that's what we gotta make more of."
yeah,
And so that way we could do other stuff, which is I mean, everyone says it, we get the Ray Bradbury like, future where we thought, it'd be
yeah,
making us our breakfast and it would do
yeah,
this and X, Y, and Z. It would clean up the dog poop and all that type of stuff. And you're like, "Oh, it's doing all the fun stuff." Like
yeah.
it's doing all the stuff we want to do. Like, well, that's not right.
No, it doesn't
I
make sense. Yeah,
I feel you on that. It's one of the things where it's just like it's going to be real interesting to see where it is in 5 years,
yeah,
like you said, in 3 years. How we land, and I mean, I know it's been corrupted in some ways, but so is everything. No matter what, there's a bad side to filmmaking, to comics, to music. There's always something in there, like
yeah.
bad egg, that has to make it a little bit more twisted. But
Well,
teaching kids the essentials, the vitals, the
yeah,
arts, you're never going to go wrong with that. I feel like,
yeah,
storytelling is, it's been there since the beginning of time. It's still the most practical tool. Creating art's been there since the beginning of time. It's still the most
yeah,
practical tool. It always comes back down to the basics and fundamentals of like music, art, and literature.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you can express yourself
Hmm.
successfully in any job, you're going to do better,
Hmm.
and if you can express yourself visually, even more so, and like through music, obviously, you can really touch a lot of people. But yeah, it's a kind of a wild world. I mean, it's you would think we would use AI to like clean up the planet, solve our problems,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we need help with solving, and maybe that will get used that way and it will be great. Like,
We could hope.
when you think about it being used for scientific research, it's possible it could,
Hmm.
advance us to a place where we need it to be, for to battle some of these issues that are so big
Yeah.
right now. But yeah, I mean, it's also possible it's learning from us, which is scary.
Yeah.
And because if you think of it learning from the internet, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
It's different when it's learning in a closed, safe vacuum. But when we put it out in the wild and say, learn from everything out there, we see how well that goes. There's just
Well,
it's a lot of
as
inaccuracies when you do a
Oh, even that. I didn't even consider the inaccuracy part of like that
Yeah.
1984 world that we kind of, anything could be edited and manipulated and like
Yeah.
changed, at a moment's notice and backdated. So we all thought that that's what the original article said.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, you're completely right on that. There's so much of just like, it's just so much unknown. And that's
Well,
what's
there's
scary,
yeah.
And it's like, how is it going to interpret these
Mm.
things that it's being learned? And how is it going to like use that information? And what will it do with it at that point if it can code, if it can do X,
Mhm.
Y, and Z? And we also taught it A, B, and C. Like, what are the possibilities we're unlocking here? What
Yeah.
potential are we unlocking? And what behaviors is it going to go on at that point? I guess the behavioral aspect of how it's going to take information and then act upon it is like the
Yeah.
mysterious part because we really don't know what it would do.
Well, I always think of it this way, like we since we do comics, you've got always got the villain, or the
Hmm.
the character, and usually the villain thinks they're not the villain. They're doing something that the world needs them to do that's
Right.
good for the world. And the one good thing that we have had going for a long time with villains is it takes them a while to accomplish these goals. They have an idea and they have to do all these steps to like become the mega villain or whatever. And then with AI, I just wonder like as things happen more rapidly and rapidly, and if you have a villainous character or a character who thinks they are fixing the world or helping the world, and then they have an AI that can do things super fast, very
Hmm.
quickly, then there's no time to like there's not enough time to stop that person,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that's it's hard enough to stop the it's hard enough to stop someone who thinks they're doing the right thing or knows what's best for you, or you just watch Putin right now, you watch any of these leaders like trying to fix things with violence, and there's you can't hardly stop them, so what are you going to do with like
Yeah. And the bigger scheme of things. And
yeah,
it comes back to like, what was like the Watchmen thing, the
yeah,
answer? Like, we need a big disaster to unify us all. But like, that's so scary. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, that's terrifying that we have to hit that level of understanding to get progress done. And it's a
Well,
shame that we just can't see it before that, you know?
yeah, we just need that World War II to get us all back on the same page, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah. It's,
yeah.
yeah. It's,
I mean, that's what's scary because it does feel sometimes. You can't get me going because I'm a sci-fi brain, and that's just
I
everything
know.
I've read.
Everything was just firing right now. Like,
Everything I read just goes right to but yeah, no, I was writing solar punk this morning, which I find very hard to write because
oh, cool.
you have to write like this is going to work out, and I'm like okay.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm
you're like,
taking
how?
how yeah. So I'm just like taking an idea that's happening in science right now that I think is definitely not going to work out, and I'm trying to write it that it does work out, and it's been a very fun opposite exercise for me because I don't write like that normally.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I guess that's the fun thing about writing and having that ability too,
yeah,
is that you could take any of these scenarios and you could really evaluate it on your own, and you could really
yeah,
put these thoughts into action and put it, apply it to some characters and kind of just like, roll the dice and see like
yeah,
what direction can this go in my head and flesh it out and give the world an example of what can happen.
exactly.
I think that's what's great about storytelling is I've always said that storytelling is like survival information. All storytelling is survival information. You're passing on something
Yeah,
that you feel, think, or have experienced to someone else so they could take in that information and know how to handle that situation when they come across it.
yeah,
So utilizing it like that, sci-fi writers, honestly, the greatest amount of survival information we've ever had, because when you go from even Orwell's Animal Farm to
yeah,
84 to everything, it all like really does apply. Foundation trilogy, all that stuff, that's
yeah,
all. Watching Dune, so much of it, my girlfriend just fell in love with like every one of the characters because like what
yeah,
it does, like when they're even talking about like how I guess like all like the past generations go into the Bene Gesserit, and
yeah.
they're like, is it fatal? And she's like, just to men. And she was just like, this is the greatest movie ever. Like this is
Just a
this is
man.
like I thought it was brilliant. But it's the truth, you know what I mean? Like so many sci-fi things have truth in them. And I think it's
Hmm.
our responsibility as those creators to really like grasp those truths and hand it to the audience and be like, think about this for a moment. Like
Yeah,
just think for a moment and check this out. And I think that's what we do with stories. I mean,
yeah,
Mary Shelley's, hopefully that introduces people to a lot of, great, poetic literature and Victorian literature, because that's what I
hmm.
really got into. And I wish we could have dived way
I know we
more
didn't
into
even get
that.
into it.
I know it's there's so much I wanted to ask about, like, how you're creating female characters, what it, you were just saying how a lot of the stuff you're pitching was before Frozen and Brave and all that. And I think, but that'll probably be a discussion for another episode.
come.